First of all, welcome everyone in the room and also virtually those who are joining. We're here in Washington, D.C. At Development Seed. And this will be the first of the OpenAQ Community Series event this year. We'll be holding a few others. My name is Krista Hazencope. I'm the director of OpenAQ. We're an air quality open data nonprofit based here in DC. And this first event will be focusing on imagining the possibilities of a globally aggregated low-cost air quality sensor platform. And I want to thank those who are making this possible, including ClimateWorks Foundation and the Clean Air Fund, who are funding this work, as well as our hosts here at Development Seed, who are letting us use this lovely space here today. So before we go any further, I want to share, most of this event is actually virtual by participation. So we had an overwhelming response of participants who signed up for the seminar from across the world, 20 different countries, many different sectors, and I think it speaks to the enthusiasm for low-cost sensing in general, and I think also to our speakers. So it's pretty exciting. To give some context about why OpenAQ is interested in aggregating disparate low-cost sensing data, to date, as some of you may know, OpenAQ has focused on aggregating and harmonizing government data from across the world of various types of air pollutants. And if you look at our map for any of the pollutants, you see something that looks like this, huge gaps across entire regions and continents. And even if you zoom in, say to here in Washington, D.C., you see huge gaps across the city as well. And so what we've wondered and what our community has wondered is what is possible if these gaps were filled? What sort of air quality forecasting, public health work, policy work could be possible if we were to fill these gaps? The second reason we're interested in aggregating low-cost sensor data on a single platform is it's one of the most requested things we've gotten from our community. And we're a community-driven organization, so we want to meet that need. And then lastly, we see a lot of value in a neutral platform like ours harmonizing low-cost sensing data on its own, especially though alongside the government sources that are already available through the system. So that's some context for our interests. And then to give you a sense of where we're going with piloting out a low-cost sensor platform. So over the course of the year, during the first half, we'll be focusing on fleshing out what that big picture of the platform looks like, what can its impacts be, how it will be used. That's very much the purpose of this conversation, is understanding how various sectors could be using this information. We'll be seeking data partners, people that are interested, organizations that are interested in sharing air quality information from low-cost sensing. We'll be building out a technical framework and the basic set of data format standards we'll be using in this pilot as well. For the second half, we'll be launching the pilot platform and figuring out how people are using it, both in terms of sharing the data and using the data, and then iterating the platform along the lines that make sense from getting that feedback. So for anyone virtually or in the room, if you are interested in sharing low-cost sensor data to our pilot platform and would like to engage with us on that, here's a link. It's also in your chat room box virtually to click on. We'd be very excited to talk to you more about sharing that information. So again, the focus of this seminar, this particular one, is going to be on the possibilities of sharing disparate low-cost air quality sensor data. Possibilities is highlighted because I think a lot of times when we talk about low-cost sensing, it's very natural to talk about the very real and substantial barriers to doing work with low-cost sensing, from data quality issues or inconsistent data standards across different platforms. And they're all very valid. But the idea of this session is a little bit more a bigger picture, stepping back, and also fun in imagining how low-cost sensing can impact the public health space, the air quality forecasting space, and policy. So that's the framing of this particular seminar. To run through quickly the agenda, you'll hear briefly from Chisato about the OpenAQ community and OpenAQ in general, and also from Shruti Madakirti, our platform lead on the OpenAQ platform. And then we'll get into our panelists. So we'll hear from Hodoli, who is from Cranfield University in the UK, but he's launched an air quality sensing effort in Accra, Ghana, and we'll learn about that. And then we'll hear from Sarath Guttikunda, who does emissions and air quality forecasting work in India and across the world, who is based in India, but here in DC in person. And we're fortunate to have him while he's here. And then we have Ananya Roy, who's from the Environmental Defense Fund, who will give the public health perspective. She's based in DC, but will be speaking from Pune, India. So we have quite a geographically diverse group to participate. And then we'll have some time at the end for a community discussion. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chisato, the next piece.
Thanks, Krista. Hi, everyone. My name is Chisato Calvert, and I'm the Deputy Director of OpenAQ. So the story of OpenAQ really started with wanting to address this challenge, and that challenge being that even though data is fundamental to fighting air pollution around the globe, there really is a lack in terms of access to that data, and that data is highly underutilized, and it's not very widely shared among diverse stakeholders. And so in 2015, OpenAQ was founded with the mission to fight air inequality by opening up that air quality data and connecting a diverse and global grassroots community. So what we do is harmonize disparate government and research-grade air quality data, and we create an open, transparent, accessible, and universally formatted OpenAQ platform. And by providing this data infrastructure, we're able to enable and catalyze individuals and organizations from diverse sectors to actually fight air inequality more efficiently and effectively. So this pertains to media, so journalists who are trying to raise awareness of air pollution, government and policymakers, climate change and public health researchers, the private sector, as well as education. So taking a look at our global map, this is the existing OpenAQ platform map where we're able to not only see the PM2.5 concentrations, but the dots actually represent where we're able to collect information in terms of air quality data. So as of date, we have collected 471 million air quality measurements, 130 data sources from 84 countries. And this actually includes both historical and real-time data of PM2.5, PM10, CO, NO2, SO2, carbon, and ozone. So the data that we provide on OpenAQ's platform has really been used widely within the research community. This includes research institutions, universities, government agencies. Many have really visited our site and utilized the platform. In addition, in 2019 alone, we've actually had over 30 citations in research publications, and those research studies have ranged from studying the indoor air quality in Mongolia, air quality communication tools for the public, as well as forecasting ozone emissions in India and beyond. And really, at the heart of the work that we're doing in OpenAQ is our OpenAQ community. So we have a very active and vibrant virtual community through our Slack channel, as well as GitHub, where participants are really able to contribute new air quality sources, exchange ideas, pose questions, and really have a platform for collaboration across the globe, which is really exciting. And in addition to the virtual community, we actually also organize and host in-person workshops. We've hosted them in cities like Sarajevo, Ulaanbaatar, Delhi, Nairobi, and Accra, just to name a few. And the purpose of these in-person workshops is really to be able to bring together diverse stakeholders, so journalists, entrepreneurs, community activists, software developers, who are really dedicated to the air pollution problem within their local community. And we're able to galvanize support as well as provide guidelines on how to use the OpenAQ platform and how access to that data can actually help to catalyze their respective work. And also, because it's such a unique opportunity for these diverse groups to come together, many times leads to community action and collective ways to actually fight the air pollution problem together. And so some stories, for example, of participants who participate in these workshops are really inspired to take action, for example, by pushing air pollution policy in their local governments. We've had journalists who are covering the challenging air pollution problems in their cities, and entrepreneurs who are taking a lead on developing web applications to raise awareness of the public health effects of air pollution. So we're really excited about continuing to build on this community, and our goal is really to meet the needs and the demands of our open community, so OpenAQ community. So we're always open to feedback, and we're looking for ways to both build upon and improve our platform, as well as build new tools and visualizations that would really help to foster this community as they fight air inequality around the world. So with that said, I would love to turn it over to my colleague Shruti, who will be walking us through a little bit more detail in terms of the OpenAQ platform.
Thank you. So I'll just go over I'm Shruti, and I'll be just going over the OpenAQ platform. So the great thing about OpenAQ is it's all built on open source technology, which is hosted on GitHub. And here you can see the various components that make up the OpenAQ platform, including the API and the website, and the most important, which is OpenAQ Fetch. And how this works is there are special adapters that have been written for each government data source that we pull the data from. And then every 10 minutes, the adapters will go grab that data. And then it's stored in the database as well as on S3. Most of this is written in Node, and it's powered by Amazon Web Services. And because it's open source, it's really cool that it's enabled people from all over the world to contribute to the platform. So how does one access this data? Best way to do that is through the OpenAQ API. So you can get data by city, by country, you can get the latest measurements, you can get information about the various sources, and also you can get metadata about the different sources. And currently the API only supports the past 90 days of information, but you can also access the full archive of historical data directly through S3, and we have some blog posts and stuff that explain how to do that. It's quite popular. We get about 15 million requests per month from 162 countries. And because, like I said before, because it is open source technology, it's enabled a lot of people to continue contributing to the platform and also build on top of it. For example, people have built like Python and R wrappers for the API. One of the most popular tools that have come out of this is a chatbot that called Smokey that allows you to just like chat with it and find out air quality information about your community. And we also have some tools that the OpenAQ team will be rolling out in the next coming year to make it easier for people to access and play around with the data. So it's really a great community, and like Chisato said earlier, the best way to keep in touch with us is to join the Slack. Follow us on Twitter, check out our Facebook page, and as always, email us at info@openaq.org. And here you have our Slack handles if you ever want to reach out to us. And last thing, note on virtual attendees, please submit your questions via the Zoom Q&A box, which should be at the very bottom of your screen. And the Q&A session will take place after the three panelists have shared their presentations. And I will hand it back to Shazad.
Thank you, Shruti. So we are really excited to introduce our first speaker, who is Hodoli from Cranfield University, and he'll be walking us through the possibilities of open source and low-cost sensor data in Ghana.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Glad to have you. Collins Gameli Hodoli from the Cranfield University and a Ghanaian. So before I just kickstart, I will before we kickstart, let me just put this across. No level of particulate matter is safe for human health. The ability of low-cost sensors to provide information on their presence in the atmosphere implies that we must change the conversation on their use, whether the reported data is plus or minus N of the actual. So yes, keep that in mind, and once I'm done with the presentation, we might get back to that. If what I'm talking through today is Yakokwe, a mobile application we are piloting in Ghana, which is basically feeding on open source data from low-cost sensors, that is pepper air sensors. We are looking to engage, educate, and empower citizens on air quality with this type of data. Can I get to the next slide, please? So this is the overview. Presenting on the context, what organization we are representing that is providing these, and what Yakokwe or the mobile application is, the progress we have made so far, plus impact, key challenges, the way forward, and conclusion. Next, please. So context, basically, we understand that air pollution is a major cause of premature death. If you come to Sub-Saharan Africa or low and middle income countries, it is very huge, 28,000 per year in Ghana alone. And you look at Africa, we are looking at 780,000. That's a lot. And all these are based on what model data, which means that they are estimates, not even the exact representation of the situation. Now, our focus is on particulate matter because it's a criteria species, and this species is used globally as an urban risk indicating factor for urban air quality. So what we need to understand is what are the levels, and then how does that affect our health, and what key indicators can we use. Now we understand again that there is scanty air quality data in Africa or most parts of Africa. This is due to limited capabilities, and studies have proven that Shuela 2012 and then Petkova as well 2013. Now we also understand that the scanty air quality data which is in our region or from our region is poorly communicated. Most of these data is found in governmental reports. You don't find it anywhere, it's not easily accessible. So this brings to mind, what can we do with this emerging approach, which is low-cost sensors? And studies that stated mid-etal 2013, Snyder et al, and all of that, have proven that low-cost sensors could be used to bridge these data gaps. And then the possibility there is that, you know, this data is saved in the cloud, which means we are able to access that remotely, and then we can pull that into meaningful use. Now, if this is in the open source, it means that citizens like myself and any other interested party could rely on that and inform others. Can I get to the next, please? So we are Clean Air One Atmosphere, which is a not-profit organization based in Ghana. We're registered. Our vision is basically to connect with individuals, clients, organizations, and be able to bridge the gap between organizations, for instance, the Ghana EPA, and how air quality data is collected and communicated. And we are doing this using emerging cutting-edge technology. So that is why our focus is basically on low-cost sensors for now, because one, we can easily get these tools and deploy them, and also put the data on the open source for everyone to use. Can I get to the next one, please? Thank you. So specific objectives, basically we are creating public awareness. We are looking to research into air quality in this part of the world. We're also looking to develop and implement clean air policies. We are linking air quality experts to the public, educational organizations, and NGOs. In Togo, for instance, I have linked Professor Dan Westervelt of the Columbia Earth Institute to the University of Togo through this medium, and we have deployed 2 core sensors there. So that is part of what we are doing. Then the other key thing is to undertake clean air projects in resource constrained settings, specifically in our part of the world. Then we're also serving as intermediary between the public and organizations to provide social intervention programs. Recently in Ghana, I was part of a community outreach project, and if I'm going too fast, just let me know. I was part of a community outreach in Ghana. We gave nose masks to motorbike riders and people working within the oil sector in Tema Oil Refinery, parts of the organizations there. Then we also looking at to undertake advocacy projects in the context of air pollution. Can I get to the next slide, please? Yeah, so this is a mobile application we're piloting. Yakokwe, I'll just say a brief about it. Ya is air from my mother tongue, Ewe language, and Kokwe is clean. So just to literally put, it's clean air. That is the meaning of the app, clean air. And what we are doing is we feed on these purple essences that we have deployed in Ghana. And again, it's not just Ghana, but wherever there is purple air deployed in Africa, we are able to feed on that data and then provide information on how clean or how polluted the air is. We are using the USAQI, which is embedded in the purple air map, and then currently an Android version. So you look at the AQI and it tells you how clean or how polluted the air is. This is basically a level and index where you measure from 0 to 500, and the higher the AQI, the more polluted the air is. And we have provided basic information which will tell you how polluted or how clean the air is and what you need to do as an individual. You need to know where you are exposed to be able to, reduce that. Now you could see the maps. When you look at Ghana, you have a dense network that is in Accra. I think yesterday also there was another deployment as well in Kumasi. And when you look at Togo, that is the 2 sensors deployed in Togo. And you look at DRC, you have 4 there. That is through Professor Dan Westervet. And you look at Angola, there's also 3 sensors deployed. So we feed on open source data from the purple air sensors to engage citizens. Can I get to the next, please? This is progress and impact. So far, that is one of our group members, Nelson. Thank you very much for being part of it. So this is how it looks like. We deploy sensors in the field, and basically that's how it is done. And Nelson is part of the OpenAQ group through the workshop that was held in Ghana, again, from the OpenAQ. And that is the deployment in Togo. Now, the impact we have made so far is through these projects. We have established the Ghana Urban Air Quality Project, and then we have 12 sensors actually, 1 in Kumasi. We have 11 in Accra, plus 3 ramps. We have also established baseline air quality data for Togo because we understand that as of then, there was no monitoring going on in Togo. We are also developing public interest, and how we are doing that, we have been on TV, we have been on radio, we are engaging, we are educating, we are telling the public. Now, I also understand that recently the EP of Ghana, alongside the Ghana Standard Authority, launched a document which is the Ghana Standard. And the fear with my communication with Mr. Apple, responsible for air quality in Ghana, is that they want to regulate the inflows of local sensors in terms of, reporting data and communicating data, because they don't want, since we don't understand how valid or how accurate data is, they don't want people just to be reporting anything and then put fear and panic in the general public. Next slide, please. Now, the key challenges we face is data. For instance, in terms of data, we understand local sensors, there are environmental artifacts which actually disturbs in terms of relative humidity and temperature. So you are worried about what is the quality of what you are giving out. And then even with that, how can it be accessed in different formats? In terms of installation, there are points where we are installing local sensors, and then, because they feed, for instance, the purple air, there are cases where you don't have a wireless, an access key on site. You need to whitelist the sensor. So the IT department, for instance, where the installation is going on, those hosting, they're like, no, how can you whitelist this on our server? Because it means, one, you want to tap. They're all scared of security issues. What are you trying to implant? will be able to fetch something which you don't have to get access to. Then we also have problem with internet connection. So we have proposed again to if we could integrate GPRS into these sensors, you could just have them installed anywhere, because we don't have internet access everywhere in Ghana or Africa, just as it is in maybe the developed or advanced worlds. Everywhere there is internet, every home, every school, but that is not the case. Now, we also have issues with security. So what is this? What is it meant for? Somebody could just pull it out and that's it. Then we are talking about power. So we have all these sunshine. Can we look at solar instead of, using electricity to connect these things to work? Again, there is limited public knowledge, because even if you look at the app, for instance, I'm not very sure we have even up to 100 downloads, which is, something we need to work on. Then for hotels that are hosting the census, they are, afraid that they will be losing customers. Because if you say my area is polluted, it means that it's not safe for people to live in. So you don't want to tag the sensor location as the name of my hotel, but rather the location. That's also another thing. Then we're also looking at bureaucracy. Okay, see this person, you want to install a sensor here, see this person, see that person, bring this letter, endorse, and all of that. So all those are holdbacks. Then there is also limited skilled human capital for data visualization. As I'm here now, there is nothing really going on in terms of how we need to analyze even data from what we have deployed in Ghana. And Dr. Kofi Amga, who is leading the Ghana OpenAQ project as well, plus Nelson, who is also working alongside. The time is not there because we are just 3 currently. And so you are looking at who is going to do what and when. I'm still in school, I'm not done. So when the focus is get this thing done and move to the next thing. Now, we don't have funds. The sensor deployment we have done so far, I think my time is running out. So far, we have the donations from Dabija and Dr. Subramanian, plus done most of it. Apart from that, and Purple also gave us some 2 sensors. Apart from that, if we have to install, it's personal money that we use to travel around. For instance, the sensors that I install in Togo, I have to use my own money to travel all the way to Togo. So, if the interest and the passion is not there, it's not going to be done. So who is going to be like, I want to use my money to be traveling all around to do this when, you're not getting anything from it? Because even as a non-profit, you need to eat and need to survive. Now we're looking at one key thing, which is also a challenge, like competition. Instead of working collaboratively, somebody thinks, okay, I want to be head of, so I don't want to be part of the group. I would rather want to do it my way, and so you come that way. But I think fighting inequality should be collaborative, and that is the only way we can do it together. Can I get to the next, please? Thank you. So we are thinking that the way forward, we need to look at collaboration. We need to increase or expand awareness, access to funds if there are proposals or something that, internationally, because locally, why we don't have much regulatory monitoring going on, or even low-cost sensor deployment going on in Africa or most parts of Africa, Ghana, is that, the organizations will tell you there's no funds. So in advanced countries where, you could easily access funds, how do you use that? So I think this OpenAQ initiative, having a pool of data which is open source, will do us a lot of good. But then are you looking at just pulling the data which is already out there, or you're also looking at installing sensors and then pulling that data? Then we're also looking to build local capacity, engage local or regional tertiary institutions. We have already started that. And we want to intensify engagement with local or regional APAs. And we are also looking at locally, can we connect with local sensor manufacturers and, try to assemble them in Ghana or wherever we're interested to do that. Next one, please. So in conclusion, studies actually have shown, and we understand that you can feed on open source data that is meaningful open source data to be able to engage citizens. You educate them, you empower them. You are looking at information specialization. That's what it says, that if you are able to know how much polluted the environment is, you should be able to tell yourself what to do. How do I even reduce exposure, or how do I reduce my contribution to emission? And we are looking at in environments with limited regulatory monitoring capabilities, we understand that low-cost sensors can actually be useful in establishing baselines. There are some areas in Ghana, for instance, where there was nothing because all regulatory monitoring is based in Accra. So in Cape Coast, for instance, we have put a low-cost sensor there, and we believe that is indicative of what is out there. And two, we're also looking at meaningful data, which will be useful for applications such as source identification. What I'm doing in one of my chapters for my research is actually to use this low-cost data to extract source features. And I cannot share these now due to data protection. So maybe when that is published, it could be. And then we're also looking at low-cost sensor data can be useful for air pollution studies. So you're looking at the patterns. These sensors can actually monitor in terms of routine, in situ, and location specific. So you look at that and see what you can do in terms of comparing levels seasonally or even from location to location, and background to background, what is there. Next one, please. Yeah, thank you very much. So acknowledgements, Prof. Frederick Coulomb, my supervisor at Cranfield, Prof. Dabi Jack, Dan Westervet, Dr. Ikmid, my primary supervisor, Dr. Kofi Amagan, who is leading the Ghana OpenAQ project, Pallavi Pant. She's been very tremendous, providing support all along the way. And Dr. Subramanian, he's also giving us some low-cost sensors, that is the ramps to deploy in Ghana. Nelson is part of the group, and Anthony is part of the non-profits Clean Air One Atmosphere, as well as Kenneth, and also thanks to the Ghana OpenAQ group. Next one, please. Yeah, so we are done. Thank you very much. The thing is the butterfly effect. Just change one thing, and it's going to lead to a lot of changes in every other thing. So we're just going to ask you to follow us on Twitter. That's Clean Air One Atmosphere. Now, before I say a stop, I'll get back to my quote again. No level of particulate matter is safe for human health. The ability of low-cost sensors to provide information on their presence in the atmosphere implies that we must change the conversation on their use, whether the reported data is plus or minus n of the actual. Meaningful open source data from these devices will provide a platform that can be explored to combat air pollution, specifically in low and middle income countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Collins. Our second speaker is Dr. Sarath Guttikunda from Urban Emissions, and he will be sharing his work on possibilities with low-cost sensors in air quality forecasting in India and beyond.
Right, thank you. So I removed the word low cost from the title because we want air quality monitoring data. Okay, so right now, OpenAQ platform itself, they're focusing heavily on officially released information from reference grade systems only. But while this low-cost sensor network is expanding, but there are also groups who are doing a medium-range sensor network with calibrated instruments that can also be part of this network and very, very useful. And also, low cost is a pseudonym. Only purchasing part is cheap, but then the operations and maintenance and keeping the data flowing, that's really is not low cost at all. So it really is very confusing to a lot of people. When we can't just buy and put it and then we have data, it's not really the case. So we want a lot of information. I'm a scientist, and it's never enough. We want a lot of information. And if you look at any air quality monitor, and what does it represent? So thumb rule is that a air quality monitor represents a radius of 2 kilometers. That's really stretching. If you get into real urban areas where you have a lot of buildings, a lot of obstruction areas, then this 2 kilometer thumb rule doesn't really come into effect at all. So for every square kilometer you want a air quality monitor. So if you have a city which is 400 square kilometers, ideally you want 400 air quality monitors or even more. Okay, so but technically, financially, that's really is not feasible. So then we start looking at representativeness and the financial feasibility and all those things. So when we start looking at air quality data, this is where we have two different bins. So you have the monitoring part, which is the physical activity. Then you have the modeling part where you take the data and start using it for many different outputs. So whether it's just for public awareness, you just simply present the data saying, I'm looking at 100 micrograms per meter cube of pollutant X, and this translates into air quality index this, and this has some kind of health impacts or implications of that. So that's one way of doing it, but then you can also use it for a few other, for validation purposes and expanding the gambit of modeling. And I think I'll show you a few examples of how that synergy needs to be developed. So right now, a lot of activities are happening in separate bins. When you have the monitoring community and you have the modeling community, when we have some access to information between the two, but this part really needs to expand more. Okay. So next three slides are actually slides from 2001. I brought these up to show the importance of air quality monitoring and the importance of need for granularity in air quality monitoring and how that actually helps in the modeling purposes. These were two missions by NASA, the first kind of field missions that NASA planned in 2001. So both of them were out of China and Japan, and basically taking measurements of all the chemical pollutants that you can think of over 1 month. And we had a ship, 2 planes, and a lot of ground monitoring and satellite access. Basically, in those days, it was really cool to have satellite access within 3 hours. Now it's become a lot more common, but it was very cool in those days. So a lot of missions were flown in between South Korea, Japan, and China, and it really increased it really gave a lot of power to the scientific community in understanding the chemical nature of the pollution, outflow of the pollution, and then how long it takes to move across Pacific when it reaches Asia. The importance was in the granularity of the information and the synergy between different types of measurements. Well, some were taken from space, some from the plane, but a lot of ground monitoring was also happening, but all of them were talking to each other and then feeding the models that were running on the ground. Again, this also pushed the envelope of how granularity can really help in understanding the local pollution. So if you look at the Shanghai area, if it's a big area, if you look at the development and all that's happening, 1 degree by 1 degree resolution emission information would be like this. When we can't really make out where the city is, and everything kind of looks in the same color. But as you go down and increase the granularity of what is there, when you look at 30-second information, which is basically 500 meters by 500 meters, then you start looking at the hotspots. So for a lot of the time, a lot of discussions that are happening from a regional scale, where you basically look at an airshed as one, the entire city as one. So you can't really make out where the action should be. So that kind of information will come only with the granularity, both in measurements and in the modeling activities increase. Okay, so this is slowly changing. And for a lot of cities right now, I'm giving the next few examples are actually from India. In almost all the cities in India, majority of the 90% of the cities, they have one air quality monitoring station. It is not really spatially and temporally representative of what's happening there. So we really need to increase that part. And I think that's where all these new systems that are coming in can really help in understanding that. And we don't have to, as I said in the very first slide, it doesn't have to be in every grid of the city, every square kilometer. We can create a representativeness of the commercial activities, population, and all the various activities that are happening, industrial activities that are happening, and we can decide. So this is an example for Bangalore area. Your core area is in the center. If you go by the thumb rules of representativeness, you need at least 41 air quality monitoring stations. Officially, there are 10 of them running already. So we can fill the other gap, the remaining gap, with a representative, either low-cost sensors or medium-cost sensors, and then spread them across. And this is happening with one of the local bodies is putting up 40 purple layers there. And we have like a largish pool of information coming in. So we know generally how much is needed, and we can start filling it up with some with reference grade, some with non-reference grade, let them talk to each other, calibrate each other, and then we can expand the overall pool. This can also be very useful in hotspot analysis. Hopefully that animation will start. Okay, that's actually the animation from the air quality forecasting system that's running in Delhi. For some reason, the animation is not running. This is the air quality data that we have for the last 8 days. And all this data is actually coming from OpenAQ platform that we pull every half an hour. And the last 2 days, you see that the pollution is above 250 micrograms per meter cube. That's the day average. But it's not the same for the entire city. So within the city, we have a lot of hotspots. And some individual districts have much higher pollution load that compared to the others. So if we can, the regular graph like this, it looks at the entire city as one. But if we spread those, I mean, if we start looking at each of the regions, each of the monitoring stations, they individually, they tell a very, very different story. So then you can start looking at each of those hotspot areas and then figure out, okay, where is this mass coming from? Is it coming from the industrial activities in the region, or is it heavily or air transport signature, or is it in a residential area where heating is being the dominant source? Right now, temperatures are under 10 degrees centigrade, means that the spatial heating component is very high. So we can start highlighting some of these things much better if we have a larger pool of monitoring stations. Delhi is a good example because from a reference grade perspective, we have 38 air quality monitoring stations running, and this is the average of all those 38 stations. But there are, again, the parallel institutions running their own network, and something that we are looking into pulling in. So if those come from the same platform that we have here with OpenAQ, then we can start looking at it more synergistically, and we don't have to replicate pulling mechanisms. When we can also start looking at some of these events. So the earlier slide is looking more from a spatial perspective, looking at a trend within a city. But then we can also start looking at individual events. So this is a classic example of the Diwali. It's a 2-day event, but if we, and it's a heavily talked about event. And most often we don't have enough understanding of what is the actual load of pollution from this event to figure out, what could be the implications of this on health. Okay. So again, a higher network of monitors. The idea is if we generally were running 100 units, you could make it 300 units just for the event so that you have a better understanding of what is the load from a event. So something like this could be used for a few other events or occasions as well. So when we can have another example is from China, where every time they have a big convention happening in, for example, Beijing or Shanghai, they start replicating the example of Olympics. So next 10 days, we will shut down all these industries so that by the day event comes, we'll have a better air quality. So that can also be studied better. Right now, a lot of that is anecdotal, but if we have more systems in place, we can actually quantify the impact of those changes. So from true modeling concept, and this is where having a wider network of data from monitoring stations can really help in the forecasting system. A good example is from London. They operate close to 110 reference grade systems, but also at the same time, the university, King's College, they also run a good number of low-cost sensors in a mobile fashion. They're going around the city and collecting information in real time. So what this does is basically increases the granularity of the forecasting system itself. So they don't call it forecasting, they call it nowcasting, which means that they can actually update what could be the next few hours almost in real time. So not every second, but they do it every 6 hours, it's increasing. Having a higher network of monitoring stations, it helps you in what we call as land use regression. You can go down to much finer resolutions. You can start looking at a road segment. It doesn't have to be a 1 square kilometer grid. Then instead of that, you'll start looking at road segments, parks, residential complexes. So we can have much higher granularity. So that's one of the reasons why when you zoom down into the London area through this portal, you will start seeing the roads as they're significantly and independently highlighted. So that's only possible because of the granularity they have in the data coming from a wider network of stations. But keep in mind, this is not a representation of only monitoring data. This is heavily modeling component. That's the heavy modeling component is there. That's basically combined with the monitoring data, and that's what's giving you the full spatial spread of the pollution. So if you don't combine the two, you will not have a map like this. Okay. And over time, we can also start looking at how do we, as the cities expand, how do we increase the monitoring network? So this is where you really need to have a good understanding of the spatial spread of the cities. We do have examples of, like, this is a satellite feed from the European Space Agency. They're basically showing you the change in the built-up area in the cities from 1975 to 2014. So what this means is where is the commercial demand that's coming from? Using that information, we can also then advise the both modeling community and monitoring community, and how do we expand the representativeness of where do we need to focus the next? To where do we put these monitors next to have a better understanding of the city itself? So as the cities expand, we also expand the monitoring network. But you will get to a stage where you don't have to expand the monitoring network anymore. So you have enough synergy between the monitoring data and the modeling data so that you'll have a higher confidence in the modeling data. Then you start, that will basically start bringing down your costs on the monitoring itself, because models are actually able to replicate that much better in what you're seeing. Okay. So there are a lot of trade-offs, but in the initial stages, you really need to invest both time, money, and science to get those two together. Okay. So this is the last slide from the reference grade perspective. If you compare between China and India, there are 1,500 continuous monitoring stations running in China. In India, we have only 200 continuous monitoring stations running. But when you look at the population size, they are the same. When you look at the pollution load side, they are the same. So we really need to have a much higher presence from the monitoring community to present a better picture. Okay. So there are a lot of synergies, there are a lot of possibilities that we can focus on, and how do we go about it. But I feel that right now we are focusing way too much on the reference grade systems only. But if we can start combining some of these parallel activities, we should also actually say them as emerging science group. If we can start combining that with the modeling activities that are happening at different levels, I think we have a lot of opportunities to expand. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarath. Our final speaker is Ananya Roy from Environmental Defense Fund, and she'll be speaking about how low-cost sensors can shape public health research.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Ananya Roy, and I'm Senior Health Scientist at Environmental Defense Fund. Next. I'm here to talk about how we've been using sensors in EDF's Global Clean Air Initiative, and more specifically share a little about how we've applied this data to assess health risks and impacts in one of our testbed cities, Oakland, California. Next. The larger Global Clean Air Initiative is leveraging new technologies to reveal air pollution at a highly localized level, giving people on the ground new insights into air pollution where they live. The initiative involves a number of what we call testbed cities, where we work with a whole host of partners to measure air pollution, using sensors on mobile platforms and dense stationary monitoring networks, and efforts to use monitoring data for policy actions, whether that be providing a baseline data, helping to improve air pollution modeling, or directly feed into policies or mitigation measures. Next. As the other presenters have said, around the world, 9 out of 10 people breathe unhealthy air. And air pollution is now the biggest environmental risk for early death, responsible for as many as almost 5 million premature deaths every year from heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, and other respiratory disease. That's more than AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria combined. And if we really think about the burden of disease and where people are, we need to be thinking about cities. Across the globe, 50% of the population lives in cities, and this is set to go up to 70 to 80% in the next few decades. In the US, already 80% of the population lives in urban areas, and that only comprises 3% of the land area. So in order to bring down the burden of disease, we really need to understand and target air pollution where people are. But most cities only have 1 or 2 monitors. And while they provide really valuable information, they do a somewhat poor job of capturing differences across the city. In many parts of the world, even that isn't the case. So to really understand how much air pollution varied across the city, EDF partnered with Google Street View and university scientists to measure and map air pollution in Oakland, California, our first testbed city. The neighborhoods and communities we worked with are socioeconomically disadvantaged, and like many other parts of the world, living amongst industrial activity, close to traffic, adjacent to large, urban planning decisions, which kind of draw a lot of emissions. For example, in this particular area, this community was adjacent to a really large shipping port. We outfitted the Google Street View cars with air quality sensors to gather air pollution data at street level. Google Street View cars drove every street and highway in Oakland an average of almost 30 times for across 2 years to collect close to 3 million unique air quality measurements of NO2 and black carbon. These are key traffic-related air pollutants. Next. And we found that air pollution is not evenly distributed. So on the map, on the left-hand side, you're seeing what the information that is being generated spatially from the regulatory monitor out there. And on the right-hand side, you see the map that we generated using the Google Street View car measurements. And so what you can really see is that air pollution is not evenly distributed at all and can in fact be up to 8 times worse on one end of a city block in comparison to another. And that many of the areas with elevated air pollution had truck traffic in this area. Next. But really, does this matter? Why should you care about it or even try to do anything about it? These are the kind of questions regulators, community groups, politicians, industry all ask. So we set out to see if the sensor data we had developed could help answer some of these critical public health questions. Using epidemiological methods, we sought to answer, does air pollution affect the health of those living there, and by how much? And then using health risk assessment techniques, we asked, who and where are people most at risk and affected by air pollution? And then even more policy relevant, how much benefit could we get if we reduced air pollution? Next. So to empirically assess whether the variation in air pollution captured by these sensors was associated with poorer health outcomes, EDF combined data from the Google Street View project with electronic health records of over 40,000 people enrolled in and insured by an integrated health system, Kaiser Permanente in Oakland. We found that after controlling for traditional factors that are associated with poor health, such as age, sex, race, obesity, other diseases, socioeconomic status, and medication use, a 4 ppb increase in NO2 exposure, 4 ppb is really small, was associated with a 16% higher risk of having a first coronary heart disease event, like a heart attack. But when we mapped it, we found that living in areas with the most elevated levels increases heart attack risk in the elderly by 40% in comparison to the elderly living in areas with lower air pollution levels in this community. And this is similar to a history of smoking. Next, please. We are continuing our work with Kaiser Permanente, looking at how air pollution is affecting additional health concerns in the community, like worsening existing asthma and increasing healthcare costs. But epidemiological studies, while providing hard evidence that air pollution is associated with health outcomes in this very community, it requires expertise, time, resources, and data which often restricts its use in many situations. But we don't need to keep doing studies again and again to show that air pollution affects health. We can just use existing information from hundreds of studies across the globe, combine it with data from sensors, and ask, who and where are people most at risk and affected by air pollution? Where should we target resources to get the most health benefit? Next, please. In order to do this, we used a health risk assessment and health impact assessment techniques to estimate the number of cases of the health outcome that are attributable to the pollutant exposure in the area. In order to calculate this, we combined sensor data on the distribution of air pollution across the area. This is information from the Google Street View cars, with a relative risk from our epidemiological studies, which then apply in a log linear fashion for each change in concentration. From this alone, we get an attributable fraction. What this is a fraction of disease in a particular area that can be attributed to air pollution. For example, in a particular area, 1 in 5 new childhood asthma cases could be attributed to NO2 exposure from traffic. Then incorporating the distribution of baseline disease rates, like incidence of asthma, across the area, we can see how much air pollution affects vulnerable areas. The distribution of baseline disease rates basically show the distribution of health disparities in the area, where some neighborhoods have higher overall disease than other neighborhoods due to underlying factors such as poverty or housing conditions. Finally, adding information on population distribution in the area, we can estimate how many excess cases can be attributed to air pollution and where the cases are concentrated. Next, please. So when this was applied to the case of West Oakland and downtown Oakland, we found that NO2 exposures were attributed to cause 40 premature deaths, 55 new cases of asthma amongst children, and 32 ER visits for asthma, all in just 15 square kilometers. But these risks and impacts were not equally distributed across the area. Here, you are seeing maps of how NO2 exposure, risks, and impacts on premature mortality varied over West and downtown Oakland. The first map on the left shows the attributable fraction, which mirrors the distribution of air pollution concentrations. And this was higher along the southern I-880 highway, which has trucks going in and out of a port in comparison to the highway on the north, which doesn't allow trucks. And other areas within the residential neighborhoods out here where there was industrial activity or main traffic thoroughfares. But the moment we included data on existing health disparities, the baseline incidence rate of disease or mortality, the pattern shifted to show us areas that had populations where they were more vulnerable to air pollution because of poor underlying health. This is seen in the middle map. Finally, when we look at the map of excess deaths, which includes information on the distribution of populations in the area, you can see the distribution of the burden of disease across the area. The attributable fraction map can and should be used to target air pollution sources. The middle map can be used when thinking about urban planning, where to develop housing. You don't want to be putting housing in a high-risk area, which would then result in high excess cases. Finally, if you are thinking about where would be the best place to carry out air pollution interventions, the area with the highest burden would give you the highest return on investment in terms of health. Just to give you, please go back to the previous slide, thanks. Just to give you a sense of the magnitude of differences being seen here, the highest disparity in attributable risk in comparison to the median in this population was 2 times higher. The excess risk was 4 times higher, and when actually broken down to 100-meter grids, with the most cases had 15 times higher burdens than the median in this population. Next, please. This kind of local, actionable intelligence can be critical when making the case for change. And community advocates on the ground in West Oakland are using these findings to push for solutions mandated by a new state air quality law, including rerouting of trucks away from homes and ensuring that adequate buffers separate industrial and residential areas. Next. This is just an example of how sensor data is being applied by EDF to assess impacts on public health and answer policy relevant questions in Oakland. The opportunities to answer other questions are huge. For example, sensors could be used to understand who is most exposed to air pollution from fires, forest or agricultural fires, or even industrial fires. And these insights could be used to develop health alerts or target public health interventions. We've been using mobile monitoring of VOCs to measure and map huge industrial emission events in Houston and have worked with the local public health department to put out health alerts in the communities most exposed. The main opportunity for sensors is that it breaks down barriers. We know that ground level air pollution monitoring is sparse in many places of the world, and monitoring is really expensive. Sensors have the potential to reduce monitoring costs, which makes it much more feasible to develop robust, objective information on how air pollution is affecting communities in the area, allowing communities to understand how air pollution is affecting their families, where they live, work, study, or play, and effectively advocate for mitigation. It could also allow decision makers to start understanding what kind of benefits that could be achieved by air pollution and climate policies, or how transportation or urban planning could increase or decrease health risks and impacts. This facilitates objective cost-benefit analysis and decision-making. If done right, it could be potentially used to evaluate effectiveness of mitigation actions. There are still some barriers. Many low-cost sensors provide data, but converting that into actionable information requires assessment of the quality of the data, regular calibration, maintenance, comparison across sensors and gold standard methods, performance evaluation across different weather and operating conditions. If the data is not measuring what you think it is, it cannot be used to assess health impacts with any level of confidence. And since we are talking about people's lives and their health, this is particularly important. The data has to be easily available to everyone. truly transparent and open. But air quality data alone isn't enough to assess health impacts. In both examples given here, we needed additional information on health, population distributions, or its characteristics. To truly recognize and realize the potential for taking sensor data to inform action in this area, it requires resources, money, people with expertise, computing, communication, and advocacy resources, and even now this remains scarce. Finally, while most conventional monitoring systems can provide a general sense of a city's air quality, they can't account for air pollution at the block level where people experience it. Knowing where pollution is coming from, who's impacted by it, and who's responsible for it makes for highly actionable information for communities, governments, and companies. Next, please. Thank you. This work has been the joint effort of many people at EDF and many across our partners in community groups, sensor companies, Google, university scientists like Susan Annenberg, and our collaborators at Kaiser Permanente, Stacy Alexeyev and Stephen van den Eden. I really am looking forward to your questions, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ananya. Really appreciate all three speakers on the community effort piece, on the public health piece we just heard, and on the air quality forecasting and really targeting sources piece from all three speakers. So a quick thanks to you guys from around the table here, but also across our virtual participants for presenting. So we'll move on to the community discussion. I think there's a lot of different ideas that were seeded from the panelists on where we can go. As a reminder, in terms of the discussion we'll have, it'll focus mainly, again, on possibilities, less so on sort of the standard barriers that are often brought up with low-cost sensing, to sort of push those boundaries of what we think might be possible with access to not just low-cost sensing data, but if it were aggregated and available in a harmonized way on a single platform. And a reminder to our virtual participants, you can submit some questions through the Q&A function. So we'll first open it up to the room, since folks here have been sitting very patiently in the room, and give a chance to the virtual participants to input some questions to the Q&A. So with that, questions from the room for any of the speakers or all of the speakers. And if you don't mind, since we have a virtual audience, if you could say your name and affiliation as well.
Sure. I'm Ethan McMahon. Today I'm on my day off, so I'm not affiliated with anyone. But I'm curious, we're focusing a lot on kind of the front end of collecting the data, improving its quality and so on, but how do we actually affect change? That's what it's about, and it's good to quantify the health benefits. That's one step closer to outcomes. But how do we use that outcome information still to achieve the real outcomes? You know, how do we bring this to local public health agencies? Do we bring this to Congress? Where do we bring this kind of information? What kind of information do they need to have a compelling, urgent call to action and make action? So it's not going to be answered right now in 2 minutes, but I think we still have to figure out how that back end is, the front end as well.
It's actually a very good question, and we were discussing this earlier.
Sure.
So when we talk about whether the advocacy group or civil society group, the two levels of information that really entice them. Mm-hmm. So one is how much is the pollution? Mm-hmm. So that's the main question that's answered if you have a air quality monitoring network. So if you want to file a public interest litigation, or if the government is being questioned mm-hmm. from the parliament, mm-hmm. that information, the basic information that gets reported in that question is the air quality monitoring data. How much? Right. So the next step is, okay, today the pollution is, say, it's in red and 200 micrograms per meter cube. Yep. The next question that comes is, okay, where is this pollution coming from? Mm-hmm. And how are we going to address it? Right. So to answer that question, the modeling community comes in. Mm-hmm. So the monitors themselves are not going to give you the source of that pollution, whether it's the sector or the regional. It could be coming from 100 kilometers away, but that won't come from that monitor itself. The modeling community comes in, and they will then put the story together. Okay, so that basically trickles down into policy. So, anyway, these are some of the stories that we have built for the cities. These are all India-based cities, and so this is the two levels of information that we basically provide to either the city officials or the civil society groups. But as I mentioned in the presentation as well, both communities have to come together. The monitoring has to come together. That has to really increase in capacity to both support the modeling community and also strengthen any case that will get filed, whether by the government themselves or by the public.
And if I could just ask Sarath, so you just handed some documents to each.
Yeah,
Are these also online as well?
Everything is online. So the idea is that if a city official picks up any of these leaflets for the city, they should have an understanding of how big is the airshed, what's the infrastructure that's there in the city, and where is my pollution coming from, whether it's coming from outside or inside, and it goes from there.
Wonderful, thank you.
And I think you can find it at Urban Emissions.
Yeah, everything is online. This is more for you to just have a quick look at it.
Very good, thanks.
Do the other panelists virtually have any comments?
Yeah, I think, going back to the question, how do we take all this information and really effect change? I think it depends on who you're trying to really take action, take action, and then figure out, who are the people, what do they care about, and how does your information that you've generated through your sensors kind of fit into their frameworks. So for example, with the work that we were doing in Oakland, we not only reached out to our community groups, and what they did with this information was really highlight the health impact, talk about the sources and their own personal experiences, but then we also talked with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, with CARB, and they were thinking more about the sources of it. And they've been trying to figure out their own modeling and mapping work and how it relates to what we've measured and mapped in the area. And finally, we also had, conversations with the ports. And so there, they were really interested in, can we do something about the truck traffic? And while working with Bay Area Air Quality Management District, they were thinking about enforcement, about, the truck routes going through areas where they were not supposed to be. So it really depends on who's responsible for what, and that requires some mapping out, right? And then very, very targeted, extraction of information from all the work that you do to really put it into the frameworks of what they can act on. So there's a whole bunch of different things in there, but I think it's a lot more complicated than people really think about, and that requires careful thought and resources to actually do that work, and it often gets overlooked.
And Colin, do you have anything you'd want to add?
I think that really sums it up. Again, I will relate it to my part of the world where EPA, from where I come from, says that, they are just regulators. So if you're just regulators and looking at these are the levels and these are the sources, and okay, how do we cut it down? That boils down to the framework development and how we need to take action. So I think we also need to look at how, internationally, how we can connect with these local firms rather than just trying to figure out what the sources are and how to take actions. How do we support them to even implement these actions and enforce or ensure that they are being taken care of? And I will say again, traffic or cars contribute a lot in our parts of the world. And this is something we all know. And in earlier presentation, it's been said that, in our parts of the world or low and middle income countries, or we can use already established work to be able to do something. So this is not the time to look at what are the sources. We already know where the sources are. So if you're shipping, for instance, used cars to Ghana or to somewhere in Africa, and you know that, they don't have the resources to be able to even monitor to see. Meanwhile, you know very well that this will contribute to air pollution. Why won't you find a way to minimize that?
Yeah, it's a good point. And I'll also say for the folks who are attending virtually, we know many of you who, by dint of who is participating, have stories similar to share and may have input on this. I think as already mentioned, we'll be circulating a survey afterwards where we hope to capture some of these responses as well to you all too. I think we'll take another question in the room, and then maybe after that we'll pivot to the virtual community to get a question. So is there another question in the room from?
I have a question for Colin. Colin, hi there. Thanks for your presentation. It was interesting to see some of the popular stuff going on in Accra. My question actually relates to what Sarath says about, one is you have monitoring data, but is there any sense in that area as to where, what's contributing to those levels that we see? Is there any sense in terms of in the research community in Accra, some analysis on what the main contributors of pollution are?
Collins, could you catch that? And can you hear us okay? Oh, we can't. Actually,
I'm trying to unmute this. Okay. So far, preliminary, we have not done any source apportionment to be able to. So whatever I say is a source now is just going to be assumed. So, the fact that even you're having high levels or low levels, you can't pinpoint that it is from traffic or is from that, because we have not done any, analysis. For instance, I was looking at using bivariate polar plot to be able to pinpoint, at least to extract some features, some source features to see that. But because I'm engaged with schoolwork now, I've not done anything with the low-cost sensor data we have deployed. But then what my research has found, which is, again, something which cannot be incorporated into this, so I don't want to go into that angle. So I don't know if that answers you, but then we are looking to do that sort of analysis. And when that is done, we'll put into preliminary findings.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Shruti, anything on the virtual participation Q&A?
Yeah, so there's a question again for Mr. Hodoli from Solomon. The question is, what yardstick have you used to pick your target deployment areas, and how do you ensure equity in deployment?
I think there's a lag.
Yeah.
I think it's the delay.
Can't quite hear you yet. We can see you speaking. Oh, there it is.
I keep muting it, yeah. Okay. The thing is, in urban settings, generally, emission sources are very complex and they are very varying. Again, you're looking at every 2 kilometers, there is even the tendency that levels will not be the same. And from the maps that is being shown from Dr. Ananya, you could even see that. So what we are doing is, because regulatory monitors are not being able to be deployed due to the cost involved and then the structure that is also they come with, they are very huge and they are very expensive. One is going for about $250,000. You don't have the means to deploy that every 2 kilometers in the cities. So we are just picking locations where there is human traffic or where there is, or any urban area where we presume or we assume that, there could be sources. So we are looking at traffic areas, we are looking at residential areas, we are looking at where people live, actually. and where human activities take place. So that is a yardstick we are using for now. The key thing is we want to be able to establish a dense network to understand these levels. So if you really understand that every 2 kilometer, even levels will not be the same, it means that you need to deploy more to be able to see that. If that answers you, or if you need more clarification, please, you can shoot it across.
And I'll point out Collins is also on our Slack channel if you want to engage with him, join Slack, OpenAQ Slack. Shruti, any other questions that we could go to virtual community?
Yeah, so there's a question from Reed Mongolia, and it is, has anyone incorporated live traffic data on their pollution map? And that's for all the panelists.
So yes, we do. So in the forecasting system that we run for, right now it's running for 50 airsheds. And there is a map in that.
Do you have more sheets?
No. So the way we use it is exactly the way Uber uses Google Maps for speed information. We use the same directions API within Google. We pull information, we assign a origin destination matrix, and we optimize that to get information for as many grids as possible for the entire airshed in a city. And we use that in multiple ways. So one is we can immediately, if you have enough information for the airshed, we can start looking at this is the main commercial activities grids and then non-commercial activities grids. So you can start doing that difference. Another is looking at the chemical signature of the emissions themselves. If a particular grid shows up at 10 kilometers an hour for, I'd say 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. during the rush hours, what it means is traffic in that grid is running at low speeds, means you have higher CO and higher VOC emissions because of incomplete combustion in the engines. And your PM and SO2 are actually lower because fuel is not consumed at the same level. So it actually, if you change the chemical signature of the emissions in that particular grid, it alters the photochemistry in the model itself. It really helps. When we're doing short-term forecasting, we're going to tell you tomorrow what will be the pollution. The traffic conditions today really affects that. So we do have, we've tested this in 50 different airsheds, and it really works well. We've been testing it out in a few other regions as well, including Accra and Dar es Salaam. It actually works. We haven't put that up on our website to show it, but it works in other places as well.
That's cool. I don't know, any other comments from the other two?
Yeah, I want to point out that the Directions API from Google, it's a paid service. It's not a free service. So it takes a lot of
so that data is
coaxing. Yeah.
I see.
But system is really, I mean, it will be really useful if you really want to go in that direction. Yeah.
Interesting. And I have a question probably for Sarath, but the other two panelists should chime in. So you especially talked a lot about sort of well, everyone really talked about the advantage of having a geospatially denser monitoring system in place. I'm curious from a timescale perspective, like the one thing with these additional sensors is that they could be reporting data on a much, and often do report data on a much faster timescale. So I think there's probably advantages with that. Also, in full disclosure, on my side of thinking, sharing this data on a platform, sharing data at a 10-second level is a bit overwhelming. So something we're trying to figure out is like what's sort of a useful time frame or averaging frame that would be helpful to a broad amount of people. So getting a sense of that, whether it's, a lot of hourly data is available now from the reference grade sources. Is 15-minute data better? Is 10-second data better? Does anyone have thoughts on that? And I know this might directly relate to some of your work as well.
So I think a two-part answer. First part is, data both from spatial and temporal perspective. If we have more resolution, it will really help us understand the diurnal cycles and seasonalities much better. That's a given fact. But then we don't want to it's an overkill to present information at 10-second interval. So one of the main targets today is public. So we want to inform tomorrow or in the next 12 hours what will be the pollution. But then all the activities are, if we can plan, on an hourly basis. So most of the outputs that we can put out, hour is basically a good standard. And we can't tell. I mean, even from the modeling perspective, there's so much uncertainty in both spatial patterns of where the activities are. I think it'll be really overkill to present information at 10 seconds, even though there is an instrument which can present data at 10 seconds. So for me, 1 hour is a good standard.
That's great. I don't know if the other two panelists have any comments on that.
Yeah, I think it's really about what do you want to do with that information, right? So from the health perspective, and depending on which pollutant you're looking at, often, hourly data is really useful. If you're trying to figure out whether you should be sending out health alerts or, trying to do some local mitigation action. For example, if you've got a dense network and you see that NOT levels spike around schools during drop off and pickup, then you can start thinking about, okay, what does that mean about exposures and then impacts for the children going to school, right, around there. So hourly data in that sense, in terms of trying to act on really short time frames, that's useful. Then from a regulatory perspective, often daily and annual averages become really important. And also those are time frames that are well established in the health literature to be associated with health impacts. So then they can be used for the kind of risk assessment and health impact assessment kind of work that we've just kind of been discussing. But then if you're thinking about pollutants such as VOCs or industrial emissions, often you want information at a much, much smaller time frame because you might be picking up emission events at smaller time frames, right? For example, hourly information. And that can be then used to put out health alerts by the public health department for the communities that are being most exposed. And that's a little bit of a stretch goal, just given how expensive VOC monitoring is. But I just wanted to throw it out there because this is a very, very real thing that happens, across the globe in many industrial situations. So it's one of the more immediate uses of the monitoring information that can be got from sensors, where you don't need absolute accuracy. You're just seeing, wow, there's this giant peak in exposures and, someone needs to be doing something about it.
Awesome, thank you. And Collins, I'm guessing from the app that you've built, that your group's built, that the fact that it shares AQI, you're looking generally at using hourly to daily data rather than something faster, using a faster time scale for your.
Yeah, we're using a faster time scale actually. I think it's 10 minutes, but because the server and how much we need to pay, we are looking at that. So we might want to extend that from 10 minutes to more than that, maybe 30. But again, adding to what is being said, whatever you're looking at depends on the objective of monitoring. For instance, if you're looking at emergency response, or say maybe hazardous leaks, you don't want to be doing hourly because you need to know exactly what is going on at every second or every minute. Yeah.
Got it, thank you. And we're at time, so I want to be respectful of everyone's virtual and in-person time. We have one more item that Chisato is going to lead us through, and we'll have a slide up to show folks.
Thank you all so much for participating in the webinar, and thank you again to our 3 panelists. We'll actually be sending out a survey on low-cost sensors after this event, and so it would be fantastic if both the in-person and virtual community would be able to take 5 minutes to fill it out. There are questions that are going to be really helpful as we, as the OpenAQ team, are piloting the low-cost sensor project, and as much feedback and insights that you'd be able to provide will really help shape our work. Again, please join us on Slack. It's a very active virtual community, and probably the best way to connect not only with the OpenAQ team, but also everyone else that we're connected to around the world. And lastly, if your organization or if you know of an organization that is contributing low-cost sensor data and would be interested in contributing to the OpenAQ low-cost sensor pilot, there's a link up here that we would really appreciate any data that you'd be willing to contribute. And we'd be happy to share this information on this slide in our follow-up email as well, in case you're not able to copy and paste these links. Thank you so much.